Okay, so Dipanjan,
Yes, Manoj.
so should we start? I mean,
Okay, sure.
yeah. Okay. So good afternoon to all of you. So this is the first session of the Star ISM and Galaxy theme, and this session we have 5 talks. The first one will be the invited one and will be given by Dr. Jiban Chandra Pandey from ARIES Nainital, and he'll be talking on colliding stellar winds in WR binaries. So rest of the 4 talks are contributed one, and I request all the speakers to be stick to their timings. And before there will be kind of for the invited talk, there will be 5 minutes for the question sections, and for the contributed talks, so there are 2 to 3 minutes for the questions sessions. So I will remind you before the question session so that you can conclude your talks before time. So with this, I invite Dr. Jiban Chandra Pandey to deliver the talk.
Okay, thank you, Manas. And I thank Associate for their invitations to talk about my work, my recent work. So I'll be talking about colliding stellar winds and Wolf-Rayet binaries. So this is my email address mentioned if anybody would like to contact with me after the talk and also. So I'm from ARIES Nainital, as Mansan mentioned. So I'll be talking under these contents. Let's introducing the topic with massive stars and associated winds. Massive star, a little bit introduction that you see also in the plenary talk. Then I will have some recent results based on 3 Wolf-Rayet stars, long period, short period, and very long period. So we'll discuss then how the wind interaction region will occur there in these stars. Finally, I'll conclude my talk. So introducing the massive stars are located at left top corner of HR diagrams, here, somewhere here. And basically, we'll be talking about the massive star of the O spectral type. With They have a temperature more than 30 kilokelvin and mass less than 10 solar mass. Lots of UV photon they have, looks like a blue. Luminous as 10 to the power 4 solar luminosity. Very short lifetime of about 10 million years. And they are supposed to be precursors of supernovae, neutron star, black hole, and probably GRBs. So I'm not talking about as them as precursors of them. And they are very rare objects, but major contributor to mechanical input. Most of them they found in the complex star forming regions are supposed to be triggered star formation as originator of the triggered star formations because of they have a high radiation pressure, hence the strong stellar wind. If you see the evolution of massive stars, there if depends on the initial mass. If initial mass is more than 75 solar mass, the O-type star will evolve to Wolf-Rayet star with the nitrogen-rich Wolf-Rayet star that we call the WN. Then goes where we'll see also the S3. Somebody is hydrogen rich, then it goes to the next phase that we call the LVB, that is luminous blue variable, as named. That is the luminous and blue and variable. They are very rare objects in the sky, so yet not studied very well. Another one is then next stage was the WN stars with hydrogen poor, goes to then WC star is a Wolf-Rayet star with the carbon rich, then nitrogen, then carbon, finally goes to the supernovae. If the mass is 40 to 75, then it goes to O to LBB, then WN, then WC, then finally again supernovae type 1C. The mass is 25 to 40 solar mass, then the evolutionary sequence will be something like this: O to LBB, then WN H4, then goes to supernovae type 2b. So if you see in the chart diagram, this is a evolutionary sequence of these stars. If you see the compare with the one solar mass star, and this is the WR star, evolution of the WR star goes to the LBV, then WR star, then finally the supernova phase. So Wolf-Rayet stars, that is WR stars, they represents the final phase of evolutions of very massive star prior to core collapse that we see in the previous slide. Their hydrogen envelope is stripped away by either stellar wind or closed binary evolutions. This reveals the products of either H burning or helium burning. They show the emission lines of helium, carbon, and nitrogen due to dense and fast wind. They are denser wind. Their wind is denser than O-type star. So spectra of WR stars are dominated by the emission rather than absorption line. If you see the classification of WR star, that we just see the WN and WC stars, you see the spectra here. It is based on the line ratio, that is presence of the line and their ratios. If the spectra consists of nitrogen, helium, then we see the subtype of WN star. If the spectra consists of carbon and helium, then we see the subtype of WC carbon star. The another subtype is a WO star, where the line of this is a quite high, quite a strong emission lines. So this is called the WO stars. So again, the WN stars are classified into the early and late type, WNE and WL, based on the line ratio of the nitrogen and helium. Similarly, the WC star are also classified in WC and WCL, late and early, based on the carbon third and carbon 4 lines, carbon third and carbon 4 lines. Again, the WO subtype stars are the extension of WC sequence, that is early type sequence, exhibiting the strong oxygen 6 lines, and with the relative strength of their carbon 4 line, they are also divided by WO early type stars or late type stars. If you see the galactic distribution of these stars, then this figure is 1D diagram on the galactic distribution, or just projection on the galactic disk. Even if this is a projection of the galactic disk, most of these stars are found within the galactic disk, plus minus 7 degrees of the latitude. If you see the contribution of WC to WN, then you see the 1:1.3 in the our galaxy. It is found that 2.7 WR star per kpc, this is the spatial density of it. The current census of WR stars say that it's only 668 at the moment. So recent catalog one can see here by the Paul Crowther, which is updating regularly this catalog. With this introduction of the WR in massive stars, let's coming to the stellar wind, which is a crucial feature of the massive star. If you compare the wind parameter of the massive stars with respect to our sun, then you see the enormous differences here. For example, the mass loss rate m dot, which is approximately 10 times more than that of the sun. Similarly, wind velocity is an order more than this. Again, the wind luminosity is an order of 9 to 10 more than that of the sun. So that enormous amount of the wind and its energy will impact in its surroundings and in its environments. So if you compare the luminosity of the wind with respect to the bolometric luminosity, this is approximately only 0.1% to that of the total luminosity, which impacts, we'll see what is the impact in later slides on this wind. So this is simply, I'm talking about the wind. If the wind, we have a binary stars, a massive binary stars, then how the wind behaves here. If we consider this diagram, this is a massive binary where WR is a primary and O type is the secondary. Both have a strong wind that we see in the previous table. So when this wind and the wind from this, they will collide with each other, they form a strong bow near to the weak winds, the wind which has weak winds. If the wind are equally, the bow will shift somewhere here. So the the formation of a strong hydrodynamics bow here, and the material will blow back from the sock front, forms a dust downstream as it tails around the stars. Then I'll show you then in next slide that how it tails around this one. Then we have the particle acceleration as well as the dust formation around it. So in the wind interaction region, this is schematic, I will see this, in the wind interaction region, this is the wind interaction region, where the sock are forms near this, colliding wind sock is somewhere here. The wind sock is also forms due to the instabilities in individual star also. Apart from then the wind will be, the collision sock will be somewhere here. So this wind interaction region, the wavelength, radio wavelength, that is non-thermal synchrotron emission will be formed. Enhanced infrared emissions, X-ray wavelengths, that will be both thermal and non-thermal. Thermal is basically soft X-ray, and also the gamma ray and non-thermal radio emissions are, this gamma ray is also non-thermal. So if you see this simulation by this ANU, and the paper is by Gosset, you see that how they forms a wake around the uh, secondary stars as the wind collides with this, and they form a boson. The density will increase somewhere here, increasing from to this, and it forms a wake around it. If I see the energy budget of this stellar wind, is only 0.1% of the bolometric luminosity is participated in the wind kinetic energy. Out of it, in the wind interaction region, only 0.110% energy is participated, which is also divided into soft material advections, thermal X-rays 1 to 10%, and other thermal process less than 0.01%. And rest 1 to 10% will go to the particle accelerations. Yes, if we have a single stars with the wind, the entire wind will be free stellar winds, where even if it is in the wind interaction region only 1.1 to 10%, here even if in the binary only 90%, 1 to 90% will be free stellar wind, which will be mechanical inputs for the ISM, thermal radio photons only 10 to the minus 8%, and thermal X-rays only 0.01%. So if you see the distribution of these energies, the luminosities as a function of bolometric luminosity across the electromagnetic wavelength range, you will see that X-ray is only 10 to the power minus 4% of the total bolometric luminosity. And UV contribution is of course maximum, that is at 98%, and rest of them is a very small. Okay. Again, I will see that because I'll be talking mostly on the X-ray stuff here. So here, the binary orbit is showing here. They are coming to close to each other. When they are coming to close to each other, the wind collision will be very strong, and close to each other, you see this is the real X-ray image. The close to each other, they will come to the real X-ray image will be brighter. Okay, when they go away, the X-ray image will be fainter and fainter. So when they coming close to each other, because of the strong wind, they emit a large X-ray. And this X-ray is basically not as very soft. It's a hard X-ray. When it goes away, they emit in the soft band of the X-rays. Again, just be talking about the dust formation here. That is, if you see this orbital motion, this is line of sight, and in the highly ecliptic orbit and very wide binaries, I'm saying to you that a period is 7.9 years. You see that if they are coming to the close to each other, the K band magnitude will be bright, and near the peristron, this is near the peristron pass close to each other. At apastron, the K band magnitude will be decreased. So close to the peristron is going to be the maximum. So showing that it forms the episodic dust maker. So this star also forms the episodic dust maker after every 7.9 years. Okay. So the importance of the wind here is that they emit all the electromagnetic wavelength range, even if they K-band, they show the dust maker for the wide binaries. And always, if there is a wind interaction region, wind collision region, they always form the X-rays. Okay, so I said that this basically the binary emits the X-rays, not necessarily that single star, single Furate star or O-type star, they also emit the X-rays. Basically, the soft X-ray, they emit the soft X-rays. If I am calling the soft X-rays the less than 2 keV or less than 5 keV, let's say. So soft X-rays are basically bioshock that are set up by instabilities in their supersonic line-driven winds. And single WR and O-type star are the source of the X-rays. And WC star, they are not yet observed. Probably they have not that much of the strong wind with respect to the WN stars. So theoretical model predict that WN stars emit the soft X-rays less than 1 keV here mentioned via the SOX, and that are set up in the, that's as mentioned here also. So only single WN star, no WC star are yet observed in the detected in the soft X-ray because they are very weak in the X-rays. So forwarding to my results, so I'll just show you that this is these are the telescopes that I have used for the data from the XMM, Chandra, NuSTAR, SWIFT, Sujaku, and AstroSat. So data were collected from 2000 to 2020 because you need a very long-term data to understand the long-term variability, X-ray variability, and their wind behavior. So I'll coming to the first project here, that is WR25, colliding wind binaries. These are the two papers based on the rest of the talk is based on this two papers. So these are the basic parameters. The positive thing with this WR25, how the people have observed since last 20 years this object from the various satellites, starting from the Sujaku to the Chandra. So because of the interest goes here, the Eta Carina. The object is Eta Carina. So we make use of these observations. The WR25 is close to here in the Trumpler 18 regions. So with making use of these observations, then we study this star since for last 20 years. So this has a spectral type. This is I would say between early and late WN stars plus O-type stars. Wind velocity is this 2.4 kilokilometers per second, and mass loss rate is 10 to the power minus 4.3 with the distance 2.1 kpc. So this is a 20 years light curves of the WR25 observing from the SWIFT. SWIFT has not 20 years, 15 years, but other observations I have not included years. So these observations are just below. There are some gap in the observations. Here are the continuous 250 days observations here. These observations, we did the time series analysis and found that 208.3 plus minus 2 days periods. Here, this is close to that of the long-term optical observation that is as of the earlier. If you see the count rates are 4 to 5 times more than the peak count, cosine state count rate. Here, the soft consists of 0.3 to 2 keV, hard consists 2 to 10 keV, and broad consists some of these two. If you see the phase logged X-ray variability here, the phase here, the zero phase corresponds to the periston passes. Since this is the ecliptic systems, the orbit is ecliptic. So it has a it has a periston and a piston passes. So closest to each other, then spectrum becomes harder during this one. That means hard X-ray is coming during the periston passes. That means collision wind is there. So hard X-ray is coming to this. So giving the spectra to harder. So count rates here peaks just before the periston passes. That I'll talk to later in my spectral analysis. Why they are peaking just before, not during the periston passage. This is the X-ray spectrum. So X-ray spectrum of at different phases that I has mentioned. This is a 0.12 to 0.18, 0.88. You see the difference in the X-ray spectrum. Also here 0.6 to 0.34, and also here 0.99 to 0.05. Why I am showing only these phases? At these phases, their binary separation is almost same. Even if after the binary separation is same, their X-ray luminosity is different. That I will come to later. So here the X-ray spectra is well explained by two temperature plasma model with 0.6 kV and 2.7 kV. From where the 0.6 kV coming? That is coming from the individual wind shocks. Individual star are giving the 0.6 kb, whereas the 2.7 kb that I saw in the previous slide, spectra is becoming to the harder during the peristaltic passes. So this is because of the wind collision. So these are the variation of the spectral parameters. So I told in my light curves, the X-ray, this is the X-ray luminosity, XH hard, soft, and broadband total. So you see that just before the peristaltic passes becoming the maximum. This is because as close to the peristaltic passes, they will collide with the lesser terminal velocity. So if they have less, because the terminal velocity will increase with the increasing their when the wind is going away to the star. So they are colliding with the lesser terminal velocity, hence they give the higher this one. Sorry, during the peristaltic passes, I'm very sorry. This is during the peristaltic passes, they collide with the lesser terminal velocity, just decreasing during the peristaltic passes, just after the peristaltic passes. That's why it is increasing towards the just before the peristaltic passes. So X-ray flux here the varies as the two components of the binary in the ecliptic system moves towards away and each other. That's what I just said that in the previous. See that the one is at the same binary separation, they have different X-ray emissions. So that's what I'm saying, that if they are coming too close to each other, the X-ray is more. If they are going away to each other, they are close. The X-ray emission is large. So these variation are looks like they are the linear trend. If you see this simple thing again, this is if the binary separation. The X-ray luminosity with these formulation is directly proportional to the inverse of the binary separations. That means with the inverse of the binary separation, X-ray luminosity increases. That means it follows the linear rise with the inverse of the binary separation. Let's see what is happening. Just I plotted the binary separation as a function of semi-major axis. Here you see that it's not showing the linear trend. It's deviating from linear trend. This is the for the soft. This is for the intrinsic one. This is for the observed one. This is intrinsic, that is corrected for the EV minus V or NH. You see that the soft X-ray is changing here, quite showing the almost linear deviation. But even the hard X-ray doesn't change much in the while correcting for the NH, because hard X-ray, the NH doesn't, the hard X-ray doesn't depend much more depend on the NH. So if you see that during this peristaltic passes, this is close to the peristaltic passes, as I see that these are the flux at this is the binary separation. At the same binary separations, if I will see that this one, this is the phase 0.8 and 0.12, 0.8 and 0.2, you see the different values of the flux. That means when it is receding, the flux is going to decrease. When it is approaching to each other, the flux is going to increase. So X-ray varies in the two components as a binary move towards and away from each other. So there is a deviation from the linear trend. Why the deviation from the linear trend? Let's explain it. So it will be explained by the whether the colliding wind is adiabatic or radiative. That will depend on the cooling parameter. That is, cooling parameter is the capacity of the soft wind to cool down through the radiative processes. So T cool upon T escape, that is given to the proportional to the D, and that binary this D is a distance from the sock region to the primary star. The D is proportional to period to the power 2 by 3. Hence, chi is proportional to the power P to the power 2 by 3. This says that if chi the period is larger, the chi has to be quite high. So if chi is greater than 1, wind is adiabatic. If chi is less than 1, wind cools rapidly, that is isothermal or this one. This can be also, we have just calculated the cooling parameter of the both component of this system. You see that during the peristaltic passes, the cooling parameter is less than 1. If the cooling parameter is less than 1, during the peristaltic passes, they are coming to close to each other, looks like they are a close binary. So hence, the system, the collision region becomes the radiative rather than the adiabatic, and rest of the binary system, it is becoming the adiabatic. The another project is WR121A. It is located towards the galactic center somewhere here at distance of 6 kpc. It was some authors the previously that found that in 2011 it has a binary companion at a distance of approximately zero point 0.6 arc seconds. So if we tried to do if the any object at a zero point 0.6 arc second away is there, whether it emits the X-ray or not. So we saw that there is X-ray emissions, but in case we just identified the X-ray emission, just source reduction here, then we didn't see any object near the zero point 0.6 arc seconds. So even if up to 0.3 arc second, we don't see any objects. This another objects, which is a WR43S3. So you don't see any object which is giving this one. So if it had been any objects, the X-ray emission is close to the wind collision region, it has to be slightly shifted to the center of the WR121A. So we probed this, then we saw that because we have a long-term observations, so we have plot the light curves, the left panel shows the light curves, second panel shows the power spectrum, then we found that interestingly it's a 4.1 day period. And we folded it that the 4.1 day period, then we saw that interesting periodic variation here, both in HR as well as in soft, hard, and total, soft, hard, and this total band. Here the top panel is Lomé-Scargal power spectrum. Here is a window function, whether it's due to the periodicity is due to the fake or real. So due to the window, it's not the periodicity is not because of this one. Then finally we clean the power spectrum. Then we found that at the same time it is the period is occurring at the same time. So it's a real period of the 4.1 days, and this shows by the folded diagram. So let's see if it has a 0 0.6 second arc second has a binary separation. Then you just go to the Kepler's third law, and the range of Wn plus O binary masses. Then you found the period is more than 2,700 years. It's much larger than we observed from the X-ray data. Further, the previous identification looks like that the previous identification of its binary companion appears not to be correct, or it may have a multiple system which is away from this one. So it is unlikely that the far away companion to give rise to strong wind.
Dr. Pandey, so I'll request you to conclude within maybe 1 or 2 minutes.
Yes. So collision gives the significant X-rays. So if you see that, if you plot the orbital period versus eccentricity, then you see that at the days 0.4 days, the system is approximately the circular, and if going to increase, then it is a elliptical one. So the cooling parameter you derive is less than 1, seems to the wind is a radiative or isothermal during this one because it's a circular orbit. So we drive to the shock opening angle here. So using this, we found the shock opening angle is approximately less than 84 degree. This indicating that the primary star, the shock of the primary star hits its atmosphere secondary stars. So it has, because since it has a larger angle, this is a half shock opening angle. If it is approximately 80 degree, this is approximately 84 degrees. So it's a large shock opening, indicating that the primary wind is more strong than the secondary wind, and the wind collision region is close to the secondary one. So another one is a WR125, very long period colliding wind binary, that is episodic dust maker, so W7 plus O9, having the strong radio source, displays 10-fold rise in IR in 1990 or 1991. That Williams concluded that condensation of dust in its wind near the Persian passes. So looking this, we observed this astrosat as well as with the 3.6 meter dot. Then we see the light curve here, that is K band. This is from 1992, just when the dust was formed. Then we see that the dust is, the K band magnitude is still increasing. We are still observing this. Unfortunately, we didn't find yesterday the observations, but we are still observing this. It's going to be increased. If it is peaking somewhere here, at the same time, you see that where the X-ray, this is going to be increased, IR is, the X-ray is going to be decreased here. You just look into that. Even in the previous X-rays was decreased, was only one observation that was also found in the very Parsons approximately 30 years back. So we concluded here that it has approximately 29 years of the period, that is episodic dust maker period is 29 years, and it has a binary orbit has a 29 years. So brightening of the K band and dimming in the X-ray, that shows the dust formation of the binary orbit, as also in the episodic dust makers. Apart from that, the additional effect that we found is that radiative inhibitions, that influence of the radiation field of the companion on the land driving or the winds. Each companion inhibits the mass loss of the other star close to the direction of the line of the center. And second one is a sudden radiative braking in highly asymmetrical systems, and strongest one may suddenly be slowed down once it comes close to the photosphere of the brighter companions. So both processes are likely to affect the properties of the wind-wind interaction region, like pre-shock velocities and shock geometry. So concluding the talk, so WR25 was and WR21 are found to be the overluminous, are colliding with binaries with the orbital period 408 and 4.1 days. The wind collision is wind collision 25, or WR25 is more or less adiabatic, but some deviations around the peristal passes due to the low pre-shock velocity close to the peristal passes. In WR21A, wind collision is found to be the radiative. The enhanced infrared emission during the times when the X-ray flux diminished suggests that episodic dust formation around the peristal passes of WR25. A period of 29 years is suggested for WR25, and radiative braking and inhibitions are likely process those occur at WCR, that wind collision regions. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Pandey, for giving nice overview on WR stars, their weight, energy, and dust formation. So maybe one or two questions. I don't see any questions on chat box.
Manush, you can ask participants to raise their hand on Zoom. In that way, we can take
Yeah,
questions.
please, if you have questions, we can take one or two questions. Please raise your hands. So I have one question.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah.
Yeah. So all the WR stars, what you see, all they are in binary system, or you do see them are an isolated single stars as
Yeah,
well?
they are around 40% of the WR populations. Around 40 to 50% are the binary. And,
okay.
rest are the single. They are single yet not probed for the binary probe. They are the single. And even if the X-ray emission, they are very weak. They are supposed to be the single WR stars when they are observed through the X-ray.
And the binary system is kind of tidally locked always?
Yes, because they are revolving around each other.
Okay. So I don't see any questions. So I thank you again for giving the talk on WR stars.
Thank
so
you.
We'll move to the next speaker.
Yeah, I'll stop the slide.
Yeah. And the next talk will be given by Bipin Kumar on optical and infrared spectroscopic studies of a very low mass nova D2891. So I invite Bipin to deliver his talk. Bipin, you have kind of 30 minutes talk, 2 minutes, questions session.
Am I audible?
Yes, you are audible. Please share your slides. Bipin, share your slides. Hello.
So is the presentation is visible?
Yeah, your presentation is visible and you are audible. Go ahead.
Okay. Okay, good afternoon, everyone. So my presentation topic is optical and infrared spectroscopy studies of a very slow nova, which is V2891C. So let me start from the very beginning of PhD work, when I was the part of the team of assembly integration of M4 instrument, which is Mount Abu Femto Object Spectrograph Camera Pathfinder, 2015 to 2019. So for its long-term science verification, I chose this long-term evolution monitoring, this very slow 9 months. So in the outlines, first I will give a quick introduction of what are the classical novae, then I'll come to the observation part of this nova, then I'll come to the results, and then I'll summarize my talk. So what are the classical novae? So basically these are the outburst consequences of a thermonuclear runaway on the surface of the white dwarf, which is accreting material from its companion star, which could be red giant or giant star. And in this outburst, the ejected material mass could be the maybe the order of the 10 power minus 4 solar mass with the velocity. This transient can write up to 8 to 10 magnitudes. So if we talk about the evolution of the novae, so they pass through the different phases. First, they shows the fireball phase, then come to the free, then nebular phase, and finally in the coronal phase. Each phase has its own characteristic spectrum in optical spectrum. And if we talk about the categorization of the novae, so in Williamson-Sari 1992, they have categorized the novae on the basis of what set of lines are present in the optical spectrum. So if we see the helium-nitrogen lines in the optical spectrum, they are categorized into helium-nitrogen class of novae. And if we see the Fe2 lines in the optical spectrum, they are categorized into Fe2 class of novae. So some novae shows the hybrid nature, means they have transformed from Fe2 class of novae to helium-nitrogen class of novae. And very few examples have been observed that shows the reverse hybrid nature, means they have transformed from helium-nitrogen class to Fe2 class of novae. These reverse hybrid class of novae are very rare. So now come to this particular object B2891CQ. So this transient is classified as a bright NIR transient because it is highly latent nova. It is found in regular survey of Palomar on 17 September 19. And when we observed it, we found it very slow nova. So if we talk about the observation part of this nova, so we have 4 sets of observations for this. So one is the optical NIR observation from Mount Abu with the M4 NX instrument. We started this campaign. And the second set of observation we taken from the CNX collaboration in the only November and December epoch. So we have 4 and 5 epoch data with the BNC spectrograph and Shell spectrograph. And third set of observation we have taken from NASA IRTF for the spectroscopy with the SPEC instrument. Only 4 epoch data we have in May and June. And then the last one is the one proposally accepted in ARIS-DOT, and we got 1 epoch of IR spectroscopy with the 10 SPEC instrument. Now come to its light curve part. So this is the light curve with from Zwicky transient facility. So it shows the light curve in G and R band. Green one is the G band, and on x-axis is the days since outburst, and here we show the color G minus R. So 2 things I want to mention with this light curve. One is the rebrightening phases. In the early phase we got in this nova. So clearly we cannot see in this G and R band nova. So we will discuss later that rebrightening happens between 50 to 130 days between. So several rebrightening episodes are there. So we'll discuss in the later in the slides. And the second thing is this around 250 to 300 days in between. So you can see that there is a dip in G band and there is a rise in R band. It means if we check the G minus R color, so there's this perfect dip we can see around T is equal to 270 days. It means dust form around 250 days and it will destruct within 50 or 70 days. So now come to the distance and extension part. So we have calculated the extension for this nova with various methods. So first method we have taken from this MR relation. So basically this MR relation is maximum magnitude versus rate of decline. It is 23. So what are these T23? So basically these are the brightness declined by 23 magnitudes. So for one example, I have taken this equation from Dell 1995, which gives the maximum absolute magnitude in terms of T2. So here we got the maximum absolute value, maximum absolute magnitude from this equation, and we put this maximum absolute from in this distance modulus equation, and we can easily plot this D versus AB. And because we have the conversion between AB to AK, AB means the extension in V band to extension in K band, we can plot easily D versus AK. In this plot, in the right panel, you can see this black line is the distance modulus equation with which we plot MV, put the values and MV and capital MV here, and we plot D versus AK. And we have also the data from Marshall 2006 in the direction of this nova. We plot with the red curve. And we at this cut point, we got this AK value is equal to 0.62, which implies that this AV is equal to 6.92, and the distance we found it is 6.03 kiloparsec. The second method which we have opted for the extension calculation, maximum magnitude, this B minus V, which we have observed is 2.47, But if we check this paper Vandenberg in 1987, this color B minus V expected to be 0. So what is the excess and in this B minus V color is 2.24, which implies that the AV is equal to 6.94. And another method which we have used for this extension calculation using this empirical Mullary in 2014 paper. So what they have done, they have calculated equivalent width at this particular 6614 angstrom, which is the diffuse interstellar band, and they give this empirical relation. So with this relation, we found this AV is equal to 6.7. So all these three values are very consistent, and we have taken this average for DRED and all the spectrum. Now come to this spectrum evolution in November to December, which is the early phase of the spectrum. So very first spectrum we have obtained with the M4SP spectrum in the right panel in the lower. You can see this 1 November 2019 spectrum. But because of this heavy reddening, we have the very low flux in the blue part. So it is not helpful in the classification of the nova. But if we check this BNC spectrograph spectrum of 5 November, you can see several second class of lines are present in the optical spectrum. So they have classified into this second class of nova. So if we check this 18 November next spectrum, which is the IR spectrum, so we have seen this several helium and nitrogen lines are present. Basically, the nitrogen lines are several, but the helium lines only faint emission it present in the NIR spectrum. So it may be possible that in the early part it's showing the helium and nitrogen line, and then after that this is turns into the Fe lines. It means it could be a case of reverse hybrid novae, but because we don't have the early IR spectrum, so we have not claimed that this is a reverse hybrid novae. So in the final we have classified into it only the Fe class of novae. Now come to the spectrum evolution in the May and June part. So till then, in the May spectrum, several foveal lines are present, which is the characteristics of nebular phase. So basically, started in May, and we have seen several lines shows red lines for these N2 oxygen lines. And we can see that from 6 May to 24 May, so lines strength are increasing. So if we check the 24 May spectrum, so the H alpha and H beta ratio, if we check, it is around 7.2, which means the medium is optically thin. Because if the medium is optically thin, then it is this value is around 2.7. So it means the medium is optically thick. And because we got this 5007 line here, which have the critical density of 10 power 5, and also nitrogen lines are present there, which have the critical density of 10 power 6. It means the medium is medium have the low density. It means there are two statements. One is the optical thick, from where this H alpha and H beta lines are coming, and the second reason from where these foveal lines are coming. So we can say that the hydrogen emission coming from this high density clump, which are embedded in lower density surrounding. Now we'll come to this coronal phase where the coronal lines are present. So I am showing these two spectrum. One is the IRTF spectrum. So, there are 4 epochal spectrum. So black lines marks with the hydrogen lines, and red lines shows that they are the coronal lines present in the IRTF spectrum in the left panel, and in the right panel, this is the spectrum of the last one spectrum which we got from this tennis bag. And if we talk about this spectrum, so this spectrum is reduced by self-developed Python routines, and we have to check further this deep or this continuum is real or not. So we have to check further over the Python routines of the data reduction process. So one thing we can mention that this coronal phase present in the September spectrum, very clearly seen there are several coronal lines are present, which is the 368 days of the outburst. And if we talk about the cause of the coronal phase, basically the cause of the coronal phase is debatable, whether it is photoionization or the collagen ionization. So according to this Riemann 2003, if this coronal phase is caused by the photoionization, then the time to start this coronal phase is given by this equation, and in our case it is around 895 days. But we got this around 368 days. It means there is not the case of photoionization in this no way. So the another case is the collagen ionization process. So with the collagen ionization process, it caused by the interaction of two ejecta at different velocity. Means we can say that in our in this NOVA, this is the possibility of the coronal phase, and we have the proof that we got the multiple ejection in the light curve, and which we will talk in the later slides. And this table shows some flux of these coronal lines. And if we check this silicon lines flux ratio, it is around 11.2, which means this the electron temperature is around 2 to 3 10 power 5, which is very high. So we can say that another indicator that
Bipin,
yes, sir.
Bipin, you please summarize in 2 minutes.
Okay, sir. Okay. So this ratio is around 2.2 to 3 10 power 5 Kelvin, which again indicates that there are two reasons. One is cool reason, which is cause for the hydrogen lyse. Another is the hot reason, which is for the coronal lyse. Next is the recombination case-pair analysis. So basically in this analysis, what we have done, we have taken bracket lines flux and we have plotted in this right panel with respect to 12 line flux. Have plotted with the theoretical values of emissivity with respect to bracket 12 lines from this Storr and Hammer paper. And we can say that these two spectrum, which are IRTF spectrum, they show some nearby values from this curve, but this next spectrum, which is in the early phase, it shows the deviation. So if we take this bracket 7 line, so we can say that it is optically thick, and this equation can be given by the tau value, that it means it is greater than 1. So if we put some constraint that this optical, this omega value, which is the opacity, it is ranges between these values for the T is equal to 10,000 Kelvin and is equal to this range. So we can get this any value, means the electron density is roughly around 10 power 9 per centimeter after 60 days. And if we interpolate, means that because we know that it goes down by T square, so after 300 days, the density is around 10 power 7 to 10 power 8. So with this electron density, we can measure the mass of the hydrogen in the ejecta. With this equation, we get this is around 10 power minus 4 solar mass. And with this other method, which is taken from Osterbrook, it is around 10 power minus 4 solar mass again. So these two values are consistent with each other. Next one is the optical depth, temperature, and mass of oxygen, which we have calculated from this Williamson's 1994. So they have given three set of equations, which gives the optical depth, electron temperature, and mass of oxygen. So with this equation, we got this optical depth around 1, electron temperature around 5500, and the mass of oxygen around 10 power minus 6 solar mass, 1% of hydrogen. Now come to this first 777 angstrom line evolution. So in this panel, we can see several different epoch oxygen around November to this May. So we can see the several plots shows the P Cygni profile, but some don't show this P Cygni profile. So these appearance and disappearance of P Cygni profile, they are some possible poses in literature. They have say something that this reference says that it is because of the hydrogen burning instability. Someone says that it is because of the re-expansion of the photosphere. And the last one is the mass ejection of the rebrightening. So what we have done here in the right panel, you have seen there are plots at different epoch, which have shown the appearance or disappearance of this P Cygni profile. If this is the light curve, basically with M4 P and AVSO. So if we take this around T is equal to 60, there is no P Cygni profile here. And if we check is the peak value around T is equal to 73, this is the P Cygni profile, and so on. So these P Cygni profiles are consistent with the rebrightening in the light curve. So the third case, which is mentioned here, this mass ejection at the rebrightening, is the possible case in this nova. So now the summary. So this nova light curve is a hybrid of jitter and flat top class of nova. First form is around 270 days after the outburst. Is very highly radiant nova. This is the value of AV is equal to 6.82, which is very high, and it belongs to a very slow class of nova, as T2 and T3 are values are very high. And of course, this is FA2 class of nova. And several mass ejection episodes are there in the early phase of this light curve. And the mass which we have mentioned is 10 power minus 4 solar mass, and the oxygen mass is 10 power minus 6 solar mass. And all these results are manuscript is in preparation and will be submitted soon. So that's all.
Thanks, Bipin, for presenting nice spectral results on the nova. And so maybe I can take one or two questions. People can raise their hands on the if they have questions. Otherwise, they can put their questions on the Slack, and corresponding authors speakers can answer later.
Just to announce to the participants, you can access the raise hand option from the participants tab at the bottom of the Zoom. So in case you want to raise your hand, go to the participants and then there will be option to raise hand.
So if there are no questions, so I thanks Bipin again. Okay, just one minute. There is one question. Ranjan, go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I had question about this. Can you have any statistics of how many novas are available in our Milky Way? Such type of things. Just a basic question.
In
our Milky Way.
No, I haven't checked that what is the rate of that nova happens in the Milky Ways.
No, some statistics if you have.
I think this nova is 0.3 nova per century. I think this is the rate that mentioned in some literatures.
Okay.
Okay, thanks, Bipin. So I invite Tritendu to talk about three main sequence variable stars in young open cluster.
I'm sharing. Am I audible?
Yeah, Tritendu, please share your slides and go ahead.
Can you see my slide?
No, we don't.
Oh,
Hello?
yes. Now?
Yes, now it's fine.
Okay. So, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Tritendu. I will talk about three main sequence variables in young open cluster. There is the brief outline of my talk. First, I will introduce the three main sequence stars, their properties, their cause of variability. Then I will introduce the stellar rotation problem. And then I will come to the dependence of periodic amplitude on stellar parameters. Then I will come to object data and how physical parameters return to same intensity. Then I will come to the result and conclude the talk. So stars are formed when dense molecular cloud collapse under its own gravity. But this collapse cannot continue forever. Gradually the pressure builds up and at this stage,
Tritendu, can you be loud? Your voice is quite low.
Yes. Is it okay now? Hello. Is it okay? Hello.
Yeah, it is okay. So I request all the participants, please unmute yourself. Tritendu, go on.
In this stage, the star is called a class 0 object. Within few million years, this star develop this can envelope around it. So in this stage, it is called a class 1 object, which within few million years gradually develop and it becomes a class 2 object, which gradually by dispersing the disk becomes a class 3 object. So what are the properties of these female sequence stars? These stars are have circumpolar disk around them. So these they emit in longer wavelength. They have excess emission in longer wavelength. Also, they are magnetically active and they are convective in nature. So the material from the disk falls on the stellar surface, which creates high temperature, which produce H-alpha emission and X-ray in this star. So one of the distinguishing feature of the stars are their variability. They vary from infrared to X-ray in full spectral range. Okay, so what are the cause of the variability? So the non-periodic variability is introduced when there is a change in accretion rate.
Tritendu,
Yes.
Tritendu, can you be a bit loud? Your voice is quite low. So speak to the microphone.
I'm trying my hard. Okay. So here are two typical example of Borot light of two premium sequence star. These are caused by variable activity. Sometimes the material that is clump which obscures the line of sight of the viewer. This can cause obscuration of the star and this is both periodic and non-periodic variability. The spot on on the surface of the rotating star. When it rotates, it can create periodic dip in the light curve. So with this, we can determine the period of the star quite accurately, which is useful to understand the stellar rotation problem. So here is stellar rotation problem, of rotation period. Then you will see the broad distribution from about 20 days in the downward the stays, and it also contracts. So if the angular momentum is comes up, then it should spin up. But we don't see that. In the as the age increases, the distribution clearly falls. So there has to be some mechanism that is dispersing the angular momentum from the star. So here in this plot, the if the angular momentum comes up, the locus the star will follow, and the solid lines represent the what locus it will follow. The, this starting rotation period. In this plot, the single every single a single cluster. Here we get this plot in another way. In the pre-main sequence stage, do not spin up that angular momentum from the system. So one of them are winds and CMEs. So stellar different winds from a lot of energy star which can disperse the angular momentum from the system. In the top right panel, you can see the CME energy versus downward is the solar, and in the upper part so you can see that in T-Tauri star the CM is quite larger. So another mechanism is the disk locking mechanism. In this, the magnetic field is thread with the disk, and this prevents the star to further increase its rotation period. As a result, a lot of stars end up with having similar rotation periods. So in observation, we see bimodal distribution in these stars, while the period with larger, whether the peak with larger period something and the peak with the lower period associated with the negligible. But this observation has not been found. It's not found. Also, this study has been done with only few nearby clusters. So, in more clusters, it is referred to study. So, here are some parameters. So, we can also see the period of star as a function of their age and mass. So as a mass of star in cluster. Also, in case of period and IRM, negligible no correlation of the periods of the cell count. So the main motivation of the study is to study the evolution of rotation, period and amplitude with stellar parameters and the role of this in variability. So we have monitored Surplus 190, which contains the IC cluster. It is a 3 telescopes, and we have used 3 telescopes. The detection has been done with standard procedure. We have estimated the parameters with CMD and ACD. So in this plot, you see blue and red.
Hello. Hello, Titindu. Hello.
And
Titendu, we lost you.
And there is a message from Srinivas saying that his Tirthendu's battery might be running low. And
Okay, Titendu, you have 2 minutes. Can you please summarize in 2 minutes?
He'll not be able to hear us, I think, because his laptop is turned off due to low battery.
Okay. So we move to the next speaker. So Titendu has spoken most of the, his results. So we'll move to the next speaker, and I will try to catch you, Titendu, if he can make presentation. Sadhana, you are available?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
So Sadhana, please go ahead. So you will be presenting multi-band linear polarimetry study of NGC 2345. Please go ahead.
Is my screen visible?
Yes, yes, yes.
Good afternoon, everyone. Today I am presenting a multi-band linear polarimetric study towards cluster NGC 2345. So I am Sadhana Singh and I am from Aryabhatta Research Institute of Observational Sciences, Aries, Nainital. So here we are looking for the polarization which we are getting through the interstellar medium, means ISM. So a beam of unpolarized light which is transmitted through a dusty medium will become partially plane polarized if there are two conditions which should be followed in order to get the ISM polarization. The first one is that dust particles are optically anisotropic, and second is there is net alignment of axis of anisotropy. So the main source of ISM polarization is the dichoric extension of starlight by aligned asymmetric dust grains in the ISM. So the mechanism for the dust grain alignment in the ISM was given by Davis and Greston in 1951, and it is known as Davis and Greston mechanism. So that shows that that tells about the alignment of dust grains, which is due to the presence of magnetic field, and this magnetic field will introduce a small non-conservative torque that causes grain to align their spin axis with the magnetic field. So basically the picture arises in the ISM is like this. So the background light from a star which is unpolarized, we assume that the unpolarized light is coming, and the grain orientation in the ISM is such that the short axis of the grain is parallel to the magnetic field. So the light which is coming from here will face different extension cross-sectional cross-sectional area, and hence the efficiency. So in the final we will get the polarized light. So as the dust grains are aligned with the magnetic field such that their short axis is parallel to the magnetic field. So the polarimetric study will give us the information about the geometry of magnetic field in that region. Also, the light interacts with the dust grains, so it shows that it will help us to get the information about the ISM dust grains, that is the shape, size and composition, and also geometry of magnetic field in that region, grain alignment and foreground dust concentration. So here we are using open star clusters for this study because majority of them has basic information like distance, membership and reddening. So we combine photometric and polarimetric study in order to extract more information about the foreground. Foreground means ISM. So, and also open star clusters are spread within an area, so the evolution of dust grains all over the region can also be analyzed. So that's why we are using open star clusters. We are taking open star clusters as sample for this study. Here I am presenting the some results from the cluster NGC 2345, which has galactic longitude 226 and latitude -2.31, and its distance is 2.5 kiloparsec, rating 0.62. So this is the region of NGC 2345. So we have divided the regions into different, we have divided the larger region into different regions in order to observe larger field of view of this cluster. So the data used was polarimetric observation, and plus the data we have taken from Gaia DR2 for information like membership, parallax of stars in the cluster. So we have observed the cluster from Aries Imaging Polarimeter Ampole, which is mounted at 104 centimeter Sampuranan telescope of Aries. So this is the schematic diagram of Ampole, so which consists of a halfway plate and a Wollaston prism. So halfway plate introduces a part difference of lambda by 2, and from Wollaston prism each image at the focal plane will be converted into two ordinary and extraordinary orthogonal polarized images, that is ordinary and extraordinary, which are focused on the main CCD. So the detector means the main CCD was 1K by 1K and having pixel size 24 micron and active field of view 8 arc minute in diameter, which has a rate noise 7 electron and gain 11.98 electron per ADU. So we have observed the cluster in 4 bands B, P, R, and I, and at 4 positions of halfway plate, that is 0, 22.5, 45, and 67.5 degree from the celestial north-south direction. In order to calibrate, for the calibration purpose, we have also observed polarized and unpolarized standard stars. For the data reduction, we have used image reduction and analysis facility IRF for aperture photometry, and actually there is a factor we have to use, this factor F, which comes due to the two reasons, because this response of the CCD is a function of the surface on CCD, and also the response of the CCD is not same for two orthogonal positions, means two orthogonally polarized images, the response may not be the same. So in order to include those factors, we have to take these factors in our calculation, where IO is the flux of ordinary image and IE is the flux of extraordinary image, and 0, 45, 22.5 and 67.5 are the positions of half plate. So the ratio R alpha at each position of alpha is given by this equation, and then by using this equation we can get the degree of polarization P and position angle theta. So we have to correct for instrumental polarization, which we have done using the unpolarized standard star, and using the polarized standard star we have corrected for 0 point polarization position angle. And so in this observation we have found that instrumental polarization was less than 0.3% in all the observed bands. Coming to the result and analysis part, these are the diagram for the distribution of degree of polarization and position angle in all the 4 bands of all observed stars. Around 197 stars we have observed in this field, and here this is the distribution of polarization in V band for members green one, and for all other stars means non-members this is the blue one. So we can see here that the peak is not separated for both members and non-members. The peak lies nearly at the same polarization, and these are the after the Gaussian fitting to the distribution of polarization and their angle. We have found that the value of P and theta in all the 4 bands comes out like this. Now coming to the sky projection of polarization vectors. So observed stars with V band polarization are overplotted on the DSS image of the region, and so we have observed 2 regions. One is the central region of the cluster NGC 2345, and one region was around 1 degree away from the cluster center. So these are the plots of those 2 regions. So the dotted line denotes the orientation of projection of galactic parallel at these both regions, and the length of the vectors denotes the degree of polarization, and their angle is measured from north increasing towards the east, and the reference for 1% polarization is given by this line. So as the grains are aligned by the magnetic field, so their measurement means the polarization position angle will give information about the magnetic field of that region. So as we can see that here are a very few stars whose angle is more deviated from this direction. But if we see majority of stars contribution, then maximum of stars have their angle nearly parallel to the magnetic field direction. So we can say that the here in this region, in the observed region, dust grains are aligned by the galactic magnetic field. Now coming to the interstellar medium polarization. So an empirical relation was given by Sarkowski in 1973 and 1975 that the wavelength dependence of ISM polarization follows this relation, where P lambda is the polarization at wavelength lambda, P max is maximum polarization, and lambda max is the wavelength corresponding to which we are getting maximum polarization. So for each observed stars, we have fitted this relation and found the value of P max and lambda max and one another parameter, which is sigma 1, which is unit weight error of fit. So if the fitting is good, means sigma 1 is less or equal to 1.6, then we can say that the polarization which we are getting is due to the ISM origin. And if fitting is not good, means sigma 1 greater than 1.6, then we can say that the presence of intrinsic component of polarization is seen in that particular star. So based on this, we have calculated P max, lambda max, and sigma 1 for all the stars and found that there are very few stars which have shown the presence of intrinsic polarization. Also, the value of total to selective extension is also related to the lambda max, which is given by this relation. So considering member stars of the cluster, we have found that P max is 1.67, lambda max is 0.55 micron, and RV comes around 3.1. So as the value of lambda max from the previous studies, it was found that the value of lambda max for the general ISM is around 0.55 micron. So we can say, and lambda max is related to the size or distribution of dust grains. So we can say that as the value comes out nearly same, so we can say that the size distribution of dust grains towards the line of sight of the cluster is similar to that of the general ISM. Also, we have found that the average value of P max and lambda max is similar for members and non-members. So this shows that the light
Sadhana, please summarize in 2 minutes.
Oh, okay. So it indicates that light from both members and non-members are coming across the same population of dust grains. Here is the polarization efficiency plot. So which polarization efficiency is the maximum polarization which is produced by a given amount of extension. So the upper limit on polarization efficiency was given by this relation, and recent estimate of average efficiency was this. So this is the plot between P max and EB minus V, where this line shows the upper limit on polarization efficiency. So this shows that the majority of stars are lying below this line, which shows that this is the polarizing efficiency towards this cluster due to ISM dust grains. Now the variation of polarization with distance is important to know about the distribution of interstellar matter and foreground dust concentration. And also if a dust layer is encountered at a distance, then the value of polarization will show a sudden jump in that at that particular distance. So in order to get this information, we have plotted PV and distance. So we can see that here near about 1.2 kpc, we have seen a small jump. So in order to confirm this, we have plotted the extension versus distance, and also in this plot also we have found that a small increase at 1.2 kpc in extension also. So it shows that the dust layer, the presence of dust layer at around 1.2 kpc towards this cluster. So in overall study, we are doing a study of the polarization towards the galactic anti-center direction. This is the map of polarization in anti-center direction. So these are the clusters which we have previously observed, and this is the location of this cluster. So basically we are doing this study. So we have found the larger value of polarization near the galactic disks, and also the dust layer was present, which before those clusters which are present in the galactic disk. And if we go below or up to the galactic disk, then there was no indication for the major dust layer. So in order to summarize, we have nearly observed 197 stars in this cluster, and these are the average value in BB, R, and I bands. And we have found a source of polarization same for members and non-members stars, as the distribution is similar in all bands. And dust grains are found are aligned by the galactic magnetic field in this direction. And this majority of stars are ISM originated polarization, and few stars have intrinsic component of polarization. And the value of average value of lambda max near 0.55 micron reveals that the size distribution of dust grains is similar to that of the generalization. So that's all. Thank you.
Thanks, Sadhana. So
Thank
for
you.
the nice results on NGC 2345. So we can take 1 or 2 questions. Please raise your hands if you have any. Okay, so I don't see any questions on the chat box as well. So, okay, okay, one question by Professor Indulekha. So please go ahead.
At least in one case.
Sorry, ma'am.
You are not. Your voice is not very clear.
At least in one case.
Your voice is not.
One case.
So Professor Indulekha, I request you to put your question on the Slack so Sadhana can answer. Somehow your voice is not coming out.
Okay.
I think it will come out okay now. In one case, the polarization direction was perpendicular to the general direction of the other stars. So, what reason were you thinking for that?
Sadhana, did you?
Can be a bit louder? Can you be a bit louder?
Okay, I'll put the question on chat.
Okay.
Actually,
yeah.
I have not understood the question.
Okay. So thanks, Sadhana. So now I invite Harmin Kaur to present results on analysis of major sources in the physical environment of young cluster S208 and W8001. Sadhana, sorry, Harmin, please share your screen and slides.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, yes.
Voice is not clear, sir.
Share your screen and speak loudly, close to the microphone possibly. Am I audible?
Yeah, sir, you are audible, but
you need to share your screen.
Yeah, sir, I'm sharing it.
But we.
Yeah, is this?
Yes.
Can you see my screen?
Yes, yes. Go ahead.
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Harmin Kaur from Kumail University, working under Dr. Alok Durgapal at Kumail University and Dr. Saurabh at Aries. I'm here going to present physical environment around young star clusters. Briefly, I'll introduce some star formation processes and I'll show my results. Young stars are formed by gravitational collapse of dense molecular clouds. And the groups are formed is called young star clusters. Young open clusters are an excellent way to study star formation and effect of mass effect on the stellar evolution. This is a color composite image of NGC 3603 in which we can see that some young stars are present, which are still embedded in their parent nebula, and some dense and dark clouds are present, which may be possible sites of star formation in future. This is the cluster NGC 3603, which contains main sequence and pre-main sequence stars. This is a massive star forming region. Example of massive star forming region, RWC49, in which we can see that stars are formed at the core of the molecular cloud, which appears as blue, and the surrounding gas is heated due to the formation of these new clouds, these new stars. This is a sequential model of star formation from a molecular cloud. In this cartoon, we can see that this is the interstellar cloud where new stars are born, and due to the effect of shock waves, first generation of stars are formed. The extent to which the massive star influence its surrounding, the extent to which massive star influences the star birth in a cloud depends on the amount of proximity in the cloud material and the positional configuration between the massive star and the cloud. If a massive star born deep inside a cloud, which is often the core of a giant molecular cloud, the ionization front from that second region created by the massive star push the cloud from within to forming a cavity. The gas and dust accumulated to a layer until critical density is reached for a gravitational collapse to form the next generation of stars. This is so-called collect and collapse mechanism of star formation. On the other hand, when UV photons from a massive star ionize the surface layer of cloud, which illuminates as a bright rim, which can be seen prominently seen in the H-alpha images, the ionization front embracing the surface of a cloud result in the shock compressing into the cloud to the dense clumps to collapse. This is called the radiation-driven mechanisms of the star formation. Now, these two collect and collapse mechanisms and radiation-driven implosion mechanisms are responsible for the trigger star formation in a molecular cloud. And the signpost of this type of star formation is age sequence in the stellar sources and the distribution of warm and cold dust inside the molecular cloud. This is an example of triggered star formation in an OB association, where here we can see that sequentially triggered star formation from generation 1, 2nd to generation 3rd. Now I'm representing some of results from my studies. This is an overview of cluster region of NGC 6910. This is a color composite image of 4 by 4 degree field of view of Cygnus X region containing a cluster NGC 6910, which is situated in a complex of massively star-forming molecular cloud. This image is obtained with the 1.4 gigahertz CGPS, which chosen as red, and 12 micron wise, and 115 gigahertz from day mantle, which is chosen as blue. The approximate locations of OB associations are shown as white eclipses. And the images at 1.4 gigahertz represent the distribution of ionized gas, and image at 115 gigahertz represent the distribution of molecular emission in the cluster region. While the image at 12 micron wise covers the far features around the region, because we know that wise at 11.3 micron covers the far features, which is the indication of photodissociation regions. We can see that entire complex is seen to contain far features producing under the influence of massive stars. The cluster is seen to as a border of the Gamma Cygni supernova remnant, which is shown as a redder circular region, and it is a shell type SNR, and this cluster is also situated at the outskirts of IC31b Bright Nebula, and this is a Herbert AB type star. And this is the studied region of this cluster. This is the composite picture of 22 micron wise and 2.2 micron 2 mass and our present data, optical data. This is 22 into 23 arc minute picture. Here red contours are the stellar surface density contours, and this green circle represent the cluster boundary in this study. And that this diamond shape structure shows the location of massive star with the spectral type of O9.5V. This is the mass function of the cluster region, which is found to be shallower than the Salpeter value, which indicates that the presence of more massive stars as compared to the low mass stars in the cluster region. And to evaluate the degree of mass segregation, we subdivided the cluster into mass groups like main sequence and pre-main sequence, and plotted their cumulative distribution with respect to the radial distance from the cluster center as shown in these figures. It is shown that effect of mass segregation is there. It means presence of massive star is there near the cluster center. This is the large scale environment of the cluster region, in which first image shows the CGPS, first and second image shows the CGPS, CGPS 480 megahertz and 1420 megahertz image. And this box type structure shows the cluster area selected in this study. And here in this radio continuum images, it reveals an extended spherical like structure, which is related to the Gamma Cygni Supernova remnant. And no molecular 30 CO emission is observed towards the cluster region. It is likely that supernova remnant might have influenced the surrounding environment. However, the impact of young SNR on the relatively old cluster is unlikely. And this is the 1.4 gigahertz NVSS continuum map. In this map, we can see the presence of extended diffuse radio continuum emission, showing the radio continuum clumps towards the cluster region, which is not seen in the CGPS images containing this diffuse type structure, and because of its lower sensitivity. The presence of these radio clumps suggests the existence of massive OB stars, which implying the ongoing star formation in this region. This is the Planck 353 gigahertz image, which is a tracer of coal dust. It seems that the cluster is not associated with any coal dust, noticeably coal dust emission in the region. And presence of warm dust in the cluster region. This A and B images, Spitzer 24 micron image and Herschel 70 micron image, both are the IR images overlaid with the NVSS 1.4 gigahertz continuum contours. The extension of the cluster is also shown in these images. These images allow one to quantitatively trace the warm dust around the cluster. This is a zoomed in view of the targeted area of the cluster region, which we used in our studies. We can see that diffuse emission is seen in all the images except in the 3.6 micron Spitzer image. And we find that the warm dust emission depicted in 24 and 17 micron image is surrounded by the 8 micron image, Spitzer image. Note that Spitzer band at 8 micron hosts far features at 7.7 micron and 8.6 micron. Considering the inclusion of far features in 8 micron band, the existence of PDR regions is evident in the cluster region, which suggests the impact of massive OB type stars present in the cluster region. this is how massive star influence their surroundings. Massive star can influence its surrounding through its different feedback pressures like pressure of second region, radiation pressure, stellar wind ram pressure. We calculated this pressure by using this equation, and we can see that pressure of second region is greater than the pressure of radiation pressure and stellar wind ram pressure. And the total pressure comes out to be greater than the pressure of the molecular cloud, which suggests that the massive stars have significantly affected surroundings. In this is a sub-millimeter image at 350 micron. At 350 micron image at the resolution of 25 arcsecond. Extension of the cluster region is also shown. This is the position of massive star. In the east direction of the cluster, some millimeter emission is observed, and it is not seen in the 24 and 70 micron emission. Here we plot the stellar surface density contours against the distribution of. Hello.
Armin, please summarize in 2 minutes. Huh?
Okay. Here we plot the stellar surface density contour against the distribution of warm dust emission and ionized gas emission. While NVSS contours are depicted by these black contours, we find that the radio continuum peaks are located away from the cluster center. Based on the NVSS radio continuum data, we calculated ionized clumps are powered by this B1, V and B 0.5 V type of stars, and using the radio continuum flux density and radius of each ionized clump, number of Lyman continuum photon was calculated, and then with the knowledge of Lyman continuum photon and the radius of the ionized clump, the age of ionized clump is estimated, which comes out to be 0.07 and 0.12 million year. This is a temperature and column density map. This is a Herschel temperature. Here we have traced the feature in the temperature map using a contour at average dust temperature. This is shown by black broken curve, and this is NVSS 1.4 gigahertz continuum emission contours. And because Herschel temperature and column density map can be used to deduce the physical environment present in the given star forming regions. Here we do not find any high density material in the direction of the cluster except in the east direction, where radio peaks were seen, which harboring the young stellar sources. My presentation, sorry. Okay. We also use near-infrared spectroscopic studies from the Transpec instrument, which is mounted on the 3.6 dot. While near-infrared spectroscopic studies are very powerful to characterize the complete high-mass stellar content with massive clusters. This is a Transpec instrument, which is a collaborative project between TFR, ARIES, and MKIR. And why I'm using it for my near-infrared studies, because it is a unique instrument. It simultaneously covers the wavelength from 550 nm to 2540 nm. It works on the two modes, cross disperse and low resolution modes, and Transpec images spectrum with 2K by 2K to RG array, and with it also has a imaging camera, built-in slit viewer, having a field of view of 1 by 1 arcminute square. Transpec has two narrowband and broadband filters, which covers the simultaneously cover the wavelength range, and spectroscopic sensitivities of in cross dispersion and prism mode is very good. And we are currently working in a region, star forming region, which contains many second regions like sharpness 208 and 207, and massive star forming region.
I mean, please conclude.
Yes. Here it is a major source, and we observed it with the Transpec instrument. This is the raw spectra of this source, and this studies is going on. And this is the conclusion of my talk. And mass function slope of our observed cluster region is shallower than Salpeter value, which presents the massive stars present in the cluster. And the distribution of warm dust is found to be in the central region, and the cluster is surrounded by PDR regions and radio peaks. And the total pressure driven by the massive star at the location of ionized clumps is also found to be very high compared to the pressure of the typical cool molecular cloud. And the age gradient between the central massive star and the ionized clump, along with the other signature, indicates the influence of massive stars. This suggests that there is a massive feedback effect from the central massive stars that triggers the shaft formation process in the outer region. And currently we are working on some open clusters, which we optical data we use from HCT and multi-wavelength data. And we are planning to obtain optical data from HCT and the Vestal Fast Optical Telescope along with the Transpec instrument. Thank you.
Okay, so any questions for Harmeen? Also, I want to announce that Tritendu will continue the talk for 5 minutes. So please join Tritendu after Harmeen. Okay. So I do not see any questions, but Harmeen, you have seen mass segregation. So do you have any idea whether it is primordial or dynamical?
Yes, sir. We also calculated the dynamical age that comes out to be 6.5 million year, which is greater than the age of the cluster. Means it then maybe this cluster may be relaxed due to some dynamical relaxation, but there are some factors also present there.
Okay. So there is a question by Professor Indulekha. Is there a substructure to the gas distribution?
Sorry, sir.
So do you see in the gas distribution, do you see substructures around the cluster?
In temperature map, we see a feature like in temperature map, we see the feature like on the.
So what is the reason for the substructure of the gas and dust?
At average this temperature, we trace a feature in temperature map, which is on TD equals to 17.5 K.
Okay, but I suggest you to go to the Slack section and answer the questions you may have over there. Okay.
Okay, sir. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. So with this, I again invite Tritendu to continue his talk, and Tritendu, you have 5 minutes to summarize. Okay.
Can you see my screen?
Not yet, not yet. Share your screen.
Screen. Now?
No.
Okay. Okay, I'm having some problem sharing the screen.
Oh, okay. So Tritendu, I suggest you share your slides on the Slack if you don't mind, so that people can ask questions if they have. So you can communicate over there.
Okay.
So,
thank you.
Yeah. So with this, I thanks all the speakers for presenting their results on the first session of the STAR ISM and Galaxy sessions. And so I think we'll assemble at 4 o'clock for the second session. So